everyone, welcome back. This is Shane Combs. I'm here with my brother Matt. This is Expanding the Zone. And Matt, we jump right into show 62. And here in basketball season, we've been getting excited about some of the different ideas that we've had. And we've had some incredible feedback. Back on show 60, we're talking some of the rule changes in the upcoming year. 61, we're talking about some of the different things on the officiating side, why the shortages, some of the different things. And we really we're able to dive into some of the different things in the game of basketball and tie some of the things from show 60 and 61 together. I know your feedback's been really good. My feedback's been really good. We appreciate that. Certainly always welcome the feedback. But before I get too ahead of myself here, thank you, Dr. Chris Good, for all the support. Check us out on the YouTube channel if you want to watch us, if you're in your car or want to get us on the way to or on the way home from work. You can find us wherever you get your podcast out there on your app. So, Matt, with that said, certainly appreciate everybody watching and listening in. And I guess I'll just ask you as we get to into the season now, I know through person and all my options on film, I probably watched almost 35 to 40 basketball games of a variety of boys, girls, a variety of levels and different things. And it's been a lot of fun. I'm excited to dive into some of those things, but why don't we rewind first and kind of talk a little bit about where you're kind of at through show 60 and 61 as we enter show 62 here this week.
Yeah, I think this show is going to be kind of what we've seen, in this first week or two of the season now. And, some teams, girls wise, 5, 6 games in, boys wise, 2, 3 games in. And like you said, we've been able to see a lot of games and just some of the things that popped out at us. I think it's going to be just kind of a smorgasbord of different subjects tonight. But obviously, like you had said in the opening there, we got a lot of feedback from our last episode where we talked about what we felt like were the real reasons of the shortage of officials and some of the things that have led to that. And I know you said a couple people stopped you. I had a really good email from a quality official that we've had that I've had over the years as a coach and now as an AD. And it's that stuff's I know I speak for you, Shane, when I say that feedback's invaluable to what we do. It's really, if you're gonna have a platform like we have, with a podcast and doing this, you have to welcome that feedback, and we do. We want that, and it doesn't always have to be feedback that agrees with us. We're not looking for that. We want honest feedback, and I think that's when you get honest feedback, it just makes for sometimes good debate, but also sometimes just some things maybe we didn't consider, right? Some eye openers from somebody else's point of view. So, I know you said you had a couple. Like I said, I had an email. I don't know where you want to start with that, but I do want to go over some of the feedback we've got.
Well, I'll just go ahead and start. I know a lot of my first couple notes actually for me in terms of what I've even been witnessing myself. I've been watching through the lens of show 60 and 61, thinking about some of those things we talked about and the rule changes and how it affects the way the game's being called. And I'll give you one that was brought to my attention through feedback, and I've really been paying attention to it because it was one of my earliest pieces of feedback. So I've really been watching it, and I think this particular person's on to something. They're talking about what's the size of crowds in terms of how the interaction between fans and officials, coaches and officials, and they talked about how so many of these games, you go to some of these shootouts, you go to some of these, maybe you get a girls game on a Saturday morning, maybe you get a boys game that's a non-league in a bigger gym. And they're talking about how crowds sometimes, it seems like it's so much more, I think the word they just said you could hear more, right? So
Right.
the officials are on the court, coaches are saying things out loud, people from the crowd are saying things, and these might be things that have been said at basketball games for years and years and years, but in some of the atmospheres that they were talking about, it you can hear it so easy. I know more ended up getting this feedback, and I was watching an early morning game. Couldn't have been more than 50 people in the gym, and a guy from the top row of the bottom section was kicked out in the middle of the second quarter. And again, I don't know if he said what he said or what he didn't say, but again, it was very easy to hear the different dialogue that was going on from fan to official. So I thought I thought that was an intriguing thing with some of the crowd and some of the atmospheres that we're in terms of how it's harder for people to block things out when it's so public in that nature. And then I had a good piece of feedback where it talked about all the different parties involved as we grow the game. We also have to play our part in growing uh, the profession of officiating. I thought that was an interesting thing, talking about getting people started younger, trying to get some mentorships in place, some different things we touched on. So those are probably two of the things that jumped out at me in terms of show 60, 61. And then as I get into my notes for tonight, I'll have more. But I know I was intrigued by the email as well, Matt. So why don't you kind of turn in that direction? And let's address some of those things before we start to turn to some of our new topic for this week's show.
Yeah, so I'm not going to share the name of the official that sent this because I didn't ask that permission from him. So I don't want to do that. This particular official, I'll be honest, is not somebody that I know extremely well. There are a lot of officials out there that I know really well. There are a lot of officials that I consider, friends or friendly with or talk to more than others, right? This particular one's not, although I do really appreciate his feedback because over the years, he's been a listener to our show, which I appreciate, obviously, because I've had him reach out to us a couple of different times. When I watched him, he worked a game at our place last year, and I just thought he was really, really professional, did a great job with what he did, worked hard. One of those guys that, quite frankly, as a coach or an AD, I would welcome, at our place anytime. He reached out to me with an email at first, kind of a short email, and said, he agrees with some, didn't agree with some stuff. So I asked him for a little more information because I want to know, again, like I said in the opener, I'm not looking for somebody to agree with us all the time. I want some honest feedback. Brought up a couple things that I thought was interesting that maybe we didn't touch on. One of the things he noted that because he said that, depending on what your like sort of frame of reference is, you may think that things aren't as bad or basically based on the fact that, well, like what he said was basically the conference that we're a part of, and the Scioto Valley Conference says all those schools do a pretty decent job of hiring security for games, right? Having an athletic directors that are there and involved, administration that's kind of keeping an eye on things. I would argue, quite frankly, that some people in our league do it better than others, but that's not something we'll get into tonight. He said for the most part, most schools do a pretty good job. He said he's in some other places in the state that, and I found this interesting, when COVID hit, right, they didn't hire security because there wasn't very many people there. And when they came out of COVID, it was just sort of like, oh well, maybe we can just sort of save that money and not hire security, right? And now the gyms are full again, and you really need security there, and it's not happening everywhere. And I know, for the school I'm at, we probably go over the top a little bit with the security we hire, probably hire more than what you typically need. It is an expense, but I do know that just before I got to the school I'm at Uniota, a couple years before I got there, they had a scary situation. A fan came on the floor, and thank goodness they had 4 deputies there that night, right? And came out and took care of that. And this fan wasn't going after an official, wasn't going after a player. Turns out was under the influence of something, wandered out onto the floor, but it got really physical, and it took several, uniformed officers to subdue this guy. Had you not had that, imagine that. Now, some administrator, some principal, ADs going out there and getting involved physically, which is never good. Trying to remove somebody. So I think schools, any school that's not hiring security, and until this particular official made me aware of that, I had not heard that. That's quite frankly, I don't want to, just be rude, but that's just not smart. I mean, I don't know, any other way to say that. If you're going to try to save, $100 or whatever, a couple $100 for to risk your fans, to risk your players, to risk your coaches by not hiring uniform security, um, to me, that's just not money well saved. That's money you need to spend. The other thing he brought up was he did get in a little bit to the ejection thing that we talked about, where official ejects a fan or whatever. Now, I don't know that he and I see this perfectly eye to eye, and I don't think I don't know that officials and athletic administrators are always going to see that eye to eye, or officials and coaches. One of the things he mentioned was that he felt like there were times where he's had to eject a fan again. And I don't know. I don't think this guy's one that typically, ejects a lot of fans. He felt like he didn't always have the support of the administrator or the athletic administrators. Like there were times where the athletic administrators really didn't want to remove somebody. Now, I will say this, as an athletic director, it's never fun, obviously, to have to go into the crowd and have somebody removed, right? And I do know there are situations where, as an athletic administrator, we feel like there are certain officials that are known for this type of thing. Well, here he goes again, ejecting another fan. It happens, it seems like every time, we do a game, uh, this guy's tossing a fan. And I know that as an athletic administrator, that frustrates us a little bit because, that puts us in a tough spot where we don't mind doing it in that extreme case. Does that make sense? Where there's something really bad. And in my case, we have security and we can, go get these guys and remove them. But I'll be honest with you, I really don't want to be put in those situations just because somebody yelled, "Come on, you're terrible." And we had a situation in one of our home games already where a fan got kicked out of the very top row. He was in the top row. I don't know what he said. Okay. Obviously, he said something. The guy heard him, kicks him out. I guess my thing is, he's in the top row. I don't know. I'm always going to have a little bit of a problem with ejections because as a coach, I always go back to this. Imagine if a fan yelled at a coach from the top row, right? Come on, coach, get your head together. You're terrible. Imagine if the coach stopped the game. If the coach stopped the game, it's like, I want that fan out of here right now. What would be said? Well, that coach lost his composure. That coach, gee, that coach needs to focus on the game. He lost his composure and wanted a fan ejected. But we applaud officials for doing that. Like, we can't have it. We're all part of this game. So I think there are times where somebody has to be removed, and there's no excuse. And one of the things he said in his email, he's had a couple of times where even uniformed officers didn't want to remove somebody. There's really no excuse for that. We as athletic administrators, we hire those guys to do a job. We're there to do a job. So if an official asks for somebody to be removed, you got to remove them. All I'm saying is, I think we need to work together to where that's not the norm. My point in the show last week was I'm just seeing way too much of that. I mean, let's be real honest. If you're an official and you do 50 games in a year, you know, should you? I mean, I would think that not more than once, twice, you should ever have to remove somebody. It needs to. What I'm saying is, it needs to be a really serious situation to do that.
Well, again, I just appreciate the feedback, and
Yeah.
I love the perspective that you give from the coach and athletic director side too, because you've obviously had a long history in both of those areas. You can reach myself and Matt through email through our respective schools there, Union Paint Valley. You can also find us on social media, and we welcome all the feedback, because as we've said so many times, Matt, we're not just doing this as like just as basketball entertainment. This is also something we look at as professional development ourselves, and we really love the conversations that we come across. So, Matt, on that note, I
Yeah.
want to kind of,
One thing too,
yeah,
Shane,
go ahead.
before we move on, let me hit you with this. One of the things this particular official said too, and you had mentioned this about getting guys started younger. Um, I think if I
That
remember
was mentioned to me on multiple occasions. Yep.
Yeah, I think this guy, the particular guy, said he got his license when he was 16 years old. So it goes to show you. And one of the things we're doing right now at our school is second semester, we're going to be starting our officiating class through the reps program that the OHSA has. And I said last week, I didn't hesitate to criticize the OHSA because I do feel like they need to do better in some of these areas. But one area they are helping in is this reps, where these students now can take this class. There is a fee per seat in the class, that there's some different ways that can be covered. We talked about being creative, right? But there's different ways schools cover that cost. And then that covers those kids' first set of dues or whatever to get licensed through the OHSA. So I just wanted to mention that. I know we're getting ready to move on, but I do want to mention that I think that program, the OHSA, is trying to promote some younger guys getting involved.
Well, I just think that's outstanding, because I've seen a lot of different things, and it's become really interesting to see how different crews are put in certain situations and different things. And there's so many scheduling things. Maybe this is a whole nother show topic one night in terms of the boys playing on a Friday night, the girls playing on a Friday night, and then Saturday mornings and Saturday nights. And you just get some different dynamics, and we certainly need more depth in the officiating because I will say this: it's I haven't seen very many good officiating crews not have a pretty smooth evening in the gym. If you have a tight game, I've watched rivalry games out of these games I've watched already. I've watched heated league battles. I've watched overtime games. Are you going to have disagreements on fouls and travels and and all sorts of things? Sure,
Sure.
but the really good officials in terms of the way they call their game, and they're very professional in their manner. I've just seen some outstanding examples of officiating, and that encourages me a great deal. I'm the first to admit if I go and sit in a game now and I don't have a rooting interest, I don't have that same emotion. I think the other thing, Matt, that I found in talking to some officials, I think the really good officials understand the amount of hours and hours that go into the work. They understand a coach's, or even in some cases a fan's emotion on that bang bang call in the fourth quarter,
Right.
right? In terms of some of those things. So I've really enjoyed the feedback, and I can certainly say that it's impacted the way I've watched basketball. And I guess that's where I want to turn, but I didn't want to cut you off. Is there any more on the
Well, no, I
feedback
think
of show 6061 before I move into my first point here on this week's show,
yeah,
Jim?
I think that I think that was well said. I think there are emotions tied to this, and I think my thing with the ejections, for instance, is I guess what I would say is there's got to be a difference between feeling unsafe or feeling threatened versus just being mad because somebody's yelling from the stands. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I would like to see the differentiation. This particular official said he's been in a couple situations where he literally felt threatened, felt like he
Sure.
had to get somebody out. And then there were
Absolutely.
times where even the administration wasn't there to, you had mentioned, it's funny, you had mentioned boys and girls playing at the same night, and this scheduling stuff now too. Hey, don't think for 1 second that stretches administration's thin too. All of a sudden now we've had situations this year where my principal's on the road watching our girls. I'm at home handling the boys. And, all of a sudden now you just have one person there instead of two. And so there's a lot of those things that go in, but, but again, no, I know we could talk about this for a while. I think we've hit on it, but I just really a little extra feedback more than normal, I would say, for us over that show, which is great. And I'm sure as we talk about some of this stuff throughout the year, things are going to come up. Officiating is part of the game, right? Just like coaching is, playing is. So these things are going to pop up from time to time. We're going to talk a little bit about tonight about the some of these rule changes. Remember, we talked about a couple episodes ago and how they're actually looking now. So these things are going to pop up time and time again, I'm sure.
Well, one of the first things I've noticed, Matt, as I said, so many of my notes started with the relation to those first two shows, was I've witnessed, I believe, two coaching technicals and one player technical. Now, the
Okay.
player technical's out, in my opinion. I don't know where you stand on that as a coach. I
Well,
can't
yeah,
think of very many. I can't think of very many situations where a player should ever get a technical. From what I gathered in that
right.
particular situation, it was a fair technical that was given out by the official, and the player was out of line. Then the coaching technical here, if I look at my notes, I thought was really interesting. I think sometimes people look at technicals as being unsportsmanlike, no questions asked, where sometimes technical is just a part of the game of basketball. In the one situation, I thought the coach, it was in a girls' game. I thought the coach, I thought she got the technical on purpose. I thought it
Mhm.
was one of those where her kids were getting beat pretty bad in the game. And I think she was coaching hard and her kids were responding. And I think she was just coaching the game, where I thought she probably got the technical for arguing in a blowout situation, where I think she was just coaching really hard and her kids responded to it. And I thought it was fine. I thought the technical maybe had to be handed out. I thought the coach was okay getting the technical, and then they moved on. Now, in the other situation, I think it was a little bit more intense. It was a closer game. There was a couple calls that certainly, depending on who you're rooting for, I'm sure could be debated, and that was a little bit more intensified. So maybe that was a little bit more of, maybe the coach didn't deserve to get it in their eyes. Maybe the officials thought that they had taken enough, so to speak. So I thought it was interesting to really watch the player official relationship and the coaching officiating. So I put down on my notes after saying that, where where did you, as you grew, I think you never lost your intensity, Matt, but I definitely think as I watched you coach in the year 5, in the year 10, in the year 15, and I think we're all like this. We all had a way of getting our emotions a little bit more in check and channeling ourselves into the moment and coaching throughout the game. Where are you at as a coach in terms of that relationship and the ability to have dialogue with the official throughout the 4 quarters of intense situations?
Yeah, I don't know. I hate to say that there's ever a reason, to get a technical, but like I suppose there are times where you want to demonstrate for your kids that you're not quitting, that you're still have that intensity level. There's times maybe where you do feel like you've got to stand up for your guys a little bit if you feel like things, are what really I think probably the vast majority of the times I argued were when there weren't fouls being called. Like I didn't you I guarantee you felt very seldom, if ever, heard me say, "Come on, let us play." Because I am a big believer that there's
Hmm.
way too much physicality. I'm just going to be honest with you. You've heard me say that on this show a lot. A lot of what we talked about with fan behavior and emotions running hot, I think, stems from physicality. I think when you allow games to get super super physical, I've seen very few fans lose their mind over and come running down out of the crowd over missed travel. I see that more of, my son got knocked down and there wasn't a call, and now I'm mad about, I think this extreme physicality leads to extreme emotion. So that's probably where I had, I've been guilty before of maybe getting a technical late in a game, in a lopsided game where I felt like my kid's safety was at risk because, okay, it's a 25-point game. We're going to quit calling fouls now. Well, there's some safety issues with that. Okay. And I'm not for that. So now I want to touch on what you said about the players though for a minute. Because I don't know about you, Shayne, but one of the things, it's funny, we always say we don't do a lot of prep, so you didn't even know I had this in my notes. One of the things I had in my notes was how much players are talking to officials anymore. Like, to me, it's something that, like, really, I got to be honest, gets on my nerves. Like I know we live in a little bit different day and age than when I first started coaching. Okay, and I'm sure that if you watched Vinton County play in 2022 versus 2002, maybe you saw a little more of that from us too, or at least maybe you saw a little more reaction, or like, oh, or I don't know. We tried very hard not to let our kids talk to officials, but I see a lot of that right now, and what's funny about it is it's like some of the officials, I think, seem okay with that almost. And I don't know. I just think that's got to be cut out of the game a little bit more. I think we need to be consistent with that. I think officials need to take a hard line on that. I mean, we're sitting here talking about fans yelling from the top row. What about a kid questioning you right out in front of everybody? You know what I mean? To me, I don't know I mean, I know how you feel about that because I know you well enough to know, but it's like, I feel like there's a lot of that right now. And what's funny to me is, like, I remember when I first came to the school I'm at now, and we had soccer. Okay. Like I've never watched soccer because at my old school we didn't have it. And I remember officials telling me, now I'll take a little bit from the captains, like the captains can talk. And I'm thinking, hey, they're still 16. I don't care if they're captains, man. Why are they talking to the officials? You know what I mean? I know, I think maybe we're just old. I mean, maybe that is showing our age, where when we played, we had coaches that were absolutely not going to let you say anything to an official. I mean, my coach would lose his mind if you did something like, you just didn't do that. You get a technical, heaven forbid, you're out there running, 100 ladders or whatever it was, so but I'm seeing a lot more of that, Shayne, and I got to be honest with you. Um, I don't think it's good for the game, and I think coaches now, to go back to the coaches side of it, I think we've got to be more and more careful how much we question officials, only because it rubs off on our players now. Our players lack composure and they're already talking too much. So then as a coach, so when I got later in my career as a coach, I tried to remind myself, hey, if I argue here, my it's going to give my kids an excuse to argue here, and so I probably argued a lot less as I got older, not just out of maybe maturity, hopefully, but that other side of it too.
That's a great point. That's interesting because I know growing up, we there used to be a lot of intense coaches that certainly had conversations with officials, and that's kind of changed from the player and coach dynamic. Now, I also wanted to be real positive. You had talked to me about culture and some of these different pieces, and I'll tell you what, I made some notes on some things I really enjoyed. I really enjoy, Matt, watching the bench and watching how teammates interact. I,
Mhm.
I enjoy watching when a player dives on the floor for a loose ball, or they take a charge, or they're down on the floor on a dead ball, watching the other four how they react. You can tell a lot about how a team's connected. I watched a lot of teams sprint to their teammate, help them up. I watched some, quite honestly, kind of stand 3 feet from them and not even act like they knew they were down there. It's just, again, just what I saw both ways. But
Right.
I saw a couple situations where, big shots were hit, or big plays were made in intense situations, and I watched some reaction on the bench, and I think it says a lot about a kid's character and a lot about their desire to win when they are just as excited for the person on the court doing it as they would have been if they themselves were out there doing it. I think some of those things are really cool. So I think that says a lot about how the kid's raised at home. I think that's a lot about the coach and the culture and the program. And does it show up on the scoreboard? Yeah, look, I don't know how you feel about it. As far as I'm concerned, that culture piece certainly helps you maximize whatever. Remember, you and I talked about this
Right.
in previous shows. It helps you maximize whatever that potential is to the highest level. So I think it's kind of a big deal. It's thing if I was a coach, and I did this when I was coaching, I certainly highlighted on film, but it's certainly something for whatever reason, just as a fan, even in the course of watching the game, I just kind of pick up on those things as I'm looking left and right and around the gym and so forth. So I wanted to throw that out there, positive. Just your reaction on some of the we talk about body language, we talk about the nonverbals, but a lot of times just in terms of how you interact with your teammates.
It's one of my favorite things, Shayne, to watch. It really is, now that, in this year plus now that I haven't coached, I really enjoy just sitting down at a game. Okay. And I enjoy watching the X's and O's, and I enjoy watching how coaches, adjust. And we're going to talk a little bit about style play later and stuff like that. But I think I enjoy most, Shayne, what you're talking about, like really just focusing in on those little things, like how are the players interacting with each other, how um, how are the even sometimes the players' reaction to the coach when the coach says something to them, and you can tell, I've made a comment. I've sat with my wife at a couple games, and then I've been at a couple games that I didn't really care who won, just kind of as a bystander, and one of the things I'd say to her, I was like, look at that person right over there on the end of the, like right now they're ticked off because they just got taken out. They're telling the teammate right now it wasn't my fault. I mean, you can just tell this is a coach, like you can
Hmm.
literally just read their mind because we've been doing this for so long. And versus that kid who you can tell is all into their role, and they're not pouting about not having a big enough role or whatever. They're just doing what they do. When they leave the floor, they're happy for their teammates. And you said you don't know if it shows up on the scoreboard. I'm 100% convinced it shows up on the scoreboard, because I don't think 15, 16, 17-year-old kids are mature enough, okay, to be their best and not like each other, or to be their best and not be in a positive frame of mind. There might be some professionals that can pull that off, okay, and be disgruntled in their role or their situation and still perform just out of professionalism. I don't think teenagers are capable of that. So I think that the things you're talking about right there with culture and all that, I think it's huge to winning and losing.
Well, another thing I'll go ahead and throw out at you, and then I certainly won't cheat them all here. I'll kind of pass it back and forth, but this is something I'm really, really big on throughout. This is my point guard bias, and I love it from a coach's perspective. I think this is even a little bit where the shot clock could add this to the game even more so. I love time and score situations. I'm constantly paying attention to, and when I say time and score, I'm not just talking about into the game. I'm talking about this could be first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. I just put a couple scenarios down on my notes. Obviously, I won't give teams and things like that as I'm doing
Right.
this, but I was third quarter, a particular game I was watching, great game. Probably the biggest lead either way was about a 3 to 4 point lead. A team was up four at the end of the third quarter. They had to put the ball and they had the possession arrow, which meant if there was no jump ball scenario in the final like 40 seconds, 35 seconds, they were going to start the fourth quarter with the ball. Well, they were able to hold. They were able to inbound on the side against pretty good pressure. They were able to get it in the scrimmage area. They were able to run a little time and score. Then with about 12, 11, 10, you could see the point guard call out a quick set. They ran a set, got their best player down in the short corner, made a nice baseline move, got fouled. Got fouled
Mm-hmm.
about 2 seconds ago. Goes the line, makes two. They start right out of the huddle with the ball in the fourth quarter. They run a quick hitter, almost identical to the play they ended up just running at the end of the quarter, but they had a little wrinkle on the backside where a role player knocked down a three. So for the first time all night, here's a team that's all of a sudden up like nine.
Right.
And it just really impressed me how the kids and how the coaching staff dominated that time and score. I don't even know that the other team did anything wrong. I mean, they guarded the heck out of them for 35 seconds, and they just ended up fouling a really good player making a move.
Right.
Um, I had another scenario, Matt, where this is just first quarter. So we think, first quarter, what's it really matter? Well, listen to this scenario. First quarter, about 24 seconds to go, they have the ball. The defense isn't really pressuring, so they're going to have the opportunity to hold for the last shot. And they end up taking a quick shot. I don't know that it was a bad shot, but again, you're shooting it with 12 seconds to go in a time and score situation. Well, you go the other way, and just in a natural penetrate kick, the best player on the other team picks up second foul. So at the
Oh
end of the
yeah.
first quarter, best player picks up the second foul when that possession didn't even need to happen. You follow what I'm saying? So like the point guard bias in me, I just love watching the game and understanding, oh, I don't know if I would have pushed it there. Oh, I think I would have went there. I think I'd pull back right here. If they could hold for one shot here, they've got the possession arrow too, or they're in the bonus, they can do this, this, or this. I love that part of the game. And sometimes when you're in the heat of the battle, you may have assistant coach, you may have some different people paying attention to that. If you're lucky enough to have experience at the point guard position, I think we do a podcast show on the point guard position alone. Maybe I'm biased, but I think you could do that. But you see what I'm saying? I love when I'm watching the game to just test time and score, and I see some teams do a really nice job, and man, every now and then I question some of it, and I think it just has a huge impact on winning.
Yeah, and it's funny early in the season, I think you see some of those mistakes even more because maybe teams without that experience at those positions, like the point guard position, and you haven't had the reps maybe, in your situational stuff in practice. I think as the year goes, what I always found as a coach is the year goes on and you've got all your stuff in, right? And you're kind of used to what you do every day. You get better and better and better at drilling those situations, hey, we're going to put 30 seconds on the clock. What are we doing in this situation? We're up three, or we're down two with 2 minutes left and don't have the ball. How are we handling this? But for me, Shane, I think time and score is a funny thing. I think the general consensus is you always hold for that last shot. By golly, you hold for that last shot, and I think there are times maybe you don't. But I think whatever it is, you have to have a plan, right? You have to, like I always felt like, there were times where my team had a lot of momentum, right? We're really on a nice run. And now, to me, there's never a reason to take a shot with 12 seconds left, okay? Because the problem with that is you're not getting the ball back, right? You're going to give them the last shot at that point. What I'm saying is more that if there's 45 seconds left, do you sit there and hold it? You've got momentum, right? Do you hold it for one there, or do you say, okay, you know what? We're going to attack, and then we're going to guard you and try to turn you over and get it back yet again. You see what I'm
Matt,
saying?
are you good enough to hold it?
Well,
I'm
and
not
that's
being funny, you know what I
right.
mean?
No, no, no. And
Can you
that's
handle it against the other team?
yeah, that's exactly you're exactly right. You took the words out of my mouth, because you need one, you've got that situation I just mentioned where you have momentum and maybe you just want to keep your foot on the gas. But then two, yeah, like you said, you want that last shot, but that other team's guarding you hard and maybe they're a little more talented than you. Do you have the ability to, like you said, to even hold it for that long? You might be better off just to go ahead and run something, try to get you a clean look, maybe even catch them being over aggressive and catch them on a backdoor cut or something like that, and then go down and guard and hope you get a stop. There's all those things. But what I think you're talking about, I saw it the other night. I saw it in a game the other night, right before halftime, where out of a timeout, you know, a situation where they call set. I assume, I wasn't in the huddle. There's probably a set being called there, and they just started too early, and shot goes up. Next thing you know, kid comes down and hits a shot at the buzzer, and now that could have been a 4-point swing, right? Or if nothing else, it was a 2-point swing. So there's little things like that can change momentum if you're not careful. And like you said, sometimes it's unlucky, right? Kid hits a half court shot on you at the buzz. Some things
Mm-hmm.
like that happen, but I think anytime you can control that momentum with time and score, I think it's big for sure.
Well, Matt, I have a couple more, but I don't want to hog them all
Well,
here. I know
no,
we
go.
both
Yeah,
had notes.
it
Go
doesn't
ahead and
matter.
kind of
Okay.
throw one at me on your side there.
Well, I mean, one of the things, and I guess this goes a little bit maybe with time and score. Um, we talked about the new rule. There a couple of weeks ago on our show, we talked about the new rules. One of them being the 5 fouls per quarter, right, instead of the 7 per half. And I think what's been interesting is two things on this. I really haven't noticed it yet accomplishing what I hoped it accomplished, which was more fouls being called. And I think part of that might be it's going to take officials a little getting used to this too. Okay. I think some officials are in habits of trying not to call fouls because they didn't want to get in those situations where I hope as time goes, they're going to loosen that up a little bit. And they're going to call more. I was at a game this year where there was a lot of fouls called, and I thought that it was such a physical, like kind of ugly game. There needed to be a lot of fouls called, and I thought the officials did a really good job in that particular game of using that rule to their advantage. They were calling those fouls, but still the first free throws were still being shot with only a minute and a half, 2 minutes left in the quarter. So it wasn't like it got out of hand, and then of course they reset. And that's the idea of it, right? To try to
Mm-hmm.
take away some of that physicality. Now, I was at a game the other night that was super, super physical, and probably needed a few more fouls called, and it wasn't happening. So I think officials are going to take some getting used to. But you know who else is having to get used to it? Our coaches, I think, trying to manage it, because one thing I'm noticing is I think coaches haven't yet got used to using that rule to their advantage in terms of giving a foul. If you got to think about something, it used to be if you're late in the second quarter and you're in the bonus, well, you don't want to put a team on the line, right? Well, now why not give a foul? If you've got a kid off the bench that doesn't play but maybe 8 minutes a night, are you worried about foul trouble? Why can't he give a foul at the end of a quarter? You see this in the NBA, maybe a little bit more or something, but like if you're at the end of you're just talking time and score, right? If the other team has the ball with 10 seconds left in the second quarter, right? They're taking the ball out on the side, 10 seconds left, and you've only fouled once. What would stop you from subbing 2, 3 guys in that you don't care if they foul? They throw that ball in, they take 2 dribbles, foul. Now there's 8 seconds left. They take it out again. They throw it in, 2 dribbles, foul. Now there's 6 seconds left. You see what I'm saying?
Interesting. Yeah.
You screwed up their entire time and score, them trying to run a set at the end or whatever. Um, I watched a coach the other night, just inexplicably to me, not foul with 20 seconds left in the fourth quarter ahead and 3 fouls to give. They didn't commit a foul. And that was bizarre to me, because I think, why would you let a team come down in rhythm? Why not use those fouls? So I think coaches have to get used to this foul management. And I think you mentioned to me maybe even some on an individual level, some foul stuff too. Some coaches have missed a couple things where maybe one of their best players gets a foul at an inopportune time. You were telling me something about that just one time in passing.
Well, I have it down on my notes where I've watched it good and I've watched it bad. You know what I mean? In terms of not going the right way, in terms of you're going to foul to stop the clock. And I've watched one situation early in the year where the other team's best player or one of their top two players fouled out, giving that fifth foul in a one possession game with like 10 or 11 seconds, where now that particular player is not on the floor when your team's coming back trying to tie or win the game. Does that make sense?
Right.
Where
Oh yeah.
now you could argue, Shayne, I want the best player out there because if I get the steal, I'm trying to get a steal, I'm trying to make a play or what. That's fine. I want to ask you a question about this particular situation you're talking about. Assistant coaches, because there's a lot going on from a head coach. Again, I've been both. So I say this with great experience on both sides of it. Did you always feel like your assistant coaches had the power or felt the comfort level to sub for you? How did you handle that? That like when it came to foul trouble or foul situations that you guys had predetermined, did you feel like you had assistants on your bench that if you were in the middle of a situation or you were coaching a situation, had the ability to do that? Because I've watched some really, really good assistant coaching in some of the early games I watched, and I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, you definitely. My coaches definitely had the ability to do that because now I had the luxury where I never had a lot of turnover on my coaching staff. Okay. So over the years, in my 22 years at the school I was at, I only had like 3 or 4 assistant coaches. So I had the luxury of, I'm talking head assistants, but even then, I had very little turnover at the JV level. So a lot of these guys became friends of mine. We had relationships outside of work, and they felt comfortable saying, because what's the word? They probably figured the worst that was going to happen was I get mad and yell at them and they could care less. You know what I mean? They'd heard that before.
And they'd
So
already heard that on the golf
yeah,
course all summer.
right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, like, what's that going to scare them, right? But no, I mean, in all honesty, I they knew I respected them. They knew I respected the role, and they knew what I wanted. Um, we didn't have a hard set rule that when you pick up your second foul, you're automatically out of the game or anything. But I think what you're talking about is, hey, there's 10 seconds left and we're on defense in the first quarter and this kid's got 2 fouls or something. You know what I mean? There's zero reason for him to be in there at that time. And you're just asking for disaster to happen. So I think those are the situations. Or a kid picks up his fourth foul,
Mm.
um, you know, 30 seconds into the fourth quarter. How many times you see this happen? Kid picks up his fourth foul at an inopportune time, right? And the coach is questioning the official about it, like, hey, what happened on that? And all of a sudden the ball comes in play and this kid's still in the game.
Yeah.
That's where an assistant needs to step up and just
Can
say, hey,
grab.
Johnny, go get
Yeah.
him. You know what I mean?
Now, don't you think a lot of those conversations? Sometimes I don't think coaches have enough dialogue about this stuff before. Like a lot of times they'll say in football, you know, we already have our 2 point analytic chart made. We know when we're going for
Right,
one or we go for two.
right.
We're not sitting there on the sidelines in the heat of the battle making the decision, right? A lot of times with foul trouble, a lot of times with philosophical things, don't you think it's important for the coaches to have that dialogue well before that heat of the moment situation, so that gives that assistant coach even more confidence that, hey, this is what the head coach wants, they're not paying attention right now.
Well, there's no question. A head coach has to uh, give his assistants a role and what he wants them to do. And then some of that, like you said, if you've been around, if you've had the same assistants for years, that stuff takes care of itself a little bit because chances are you're doing what we're doing tonight. You're sitting around watching a game some night thinking, oh, wow, how did that happen? That should never happen, and you just learn that way. But if you've got a new staff, and then you may literally have to sit down with a piece of paper and say, hey, here's some things I want you to write down and consider. I want you to remember this. Here's what I need you to do. If this situation happens, go ahead and jump in that situation and take care of that. um, I mean, and I don't want to get off topic here because we could probably do a whole show on this too in May sometimes, but it drives me nuts when I see like a coaching staff not having a role. Like why are you going to
Yeah.
have 5 guys sitting over there if they're just going to dress the same and have a clipboard and look important. I mean, like they got to have a reason to be there. Like there needs to be a role for everybody. And I think the best coaching staffs have that. For me, my at at the end of my career, especially, it just so happened that my assistant coach, who is now the head coach at Benton County, was a guy that called most of our offensive sets. He kind of knew what we were wanting to do. It's not like I couldn't chime in and say, "Hey, let's run this," but he sort of had a grasp on that. I handled more of the personnel substitutions, a little bit of the defensive side of things, the special situations. I had one coach that his whole job was to call out of bound underplays. He did. He called all OB unders. Had another coach who's in charge of making sure our body language on the bench was right. He was looking down there, like making sure kids were, every coach had a role. You don't,
Culture piece.
it
Yeah.
shouldn't just be a front row seat to the game. There's got to be a reason to be there and a role to play.
Hmm. You had mentioned something to me about a week ago, and I had some various things that I think will fall under this. Talk to me a little bit about identity. I know that's a word you're big on. You even mentioned it, I think, in a previous show. I have kind of a list of some things that I think will go into this particular topic. Why don't you introduce what you're talking about when you are watching basketball earlier in the year and you think identity?
Well, I think when I say the word identity, and I think this is hard for teams early in the year, some teams, is if I come watch your team play, okay, and I just sit down and I just say, okay, I'm gonna watch this game. I would think that a team that has an identity, a team, when I say identity, it's like, okay, this is what we rally around in terms of our style of play. This is okay, so we press full court, right? Or we play zone. We play fast offensively, or we play really disciplined and methodical offensively. I should be able to watch and say, boy, that team does this really well. Like, boy, that team, um, you know, um, the school I'm at, we happen right now to have a really good girls team. Okay. It's not hard to see their identity. They're going to play super, super fast. They're going to press all the time, with most of the time, and they're going to run up and down. They're going to take quick shots. That's how they play. They play that way no matter what, right? That's how they play. That's what I mean by identity. I think some teams get caught in the middle, like, well, right now things are going well. We're going to play fast. Well, right now, we're going to slow it way down. Or right now, defensively, we sort of pressure the ball, but we sort of don't. And we sort of, that's what I'm talking about, Shane. I think, and I don't think it's always bad coaching or whatever. I think it's really hard
Hmm.
sometimes early in a season, especially if you have a young team or you're trying to find yourself a little bit. It's hard sometimes to know what your identity is. Like, what are we all about? Like, how are we going to play? But I think if you don't develop that, it's really, really hard to be consistent. One of the things that's funny about style play, and I want to get your take on this, there are so many different ways to be good. I mean, you've seen teams play pack line, just keep the ball in front type of defense. Don't let the ball in the paint. Give up an outside, force outside shots with a hand. Don't get out in passing lanes. Don't really try to cause turnovers. Just kind of keep everything in front of you. And then, and then you see teams press and trap. And in both cases, you've seen teams do that and win championships. In both, you've seen teams play fast and win championships. You see teams play really slow and they win 48-44, right? There's different ways to do it, but I think it's got to be your team has to be bought in, right, to how you're doing it, and everybody be on the same page.
I think a big thing that comes to my mind, Matt, is it's very natural through the course of the year, probably even through the course of every game, to where you're going to play really well, and then you're just not going to play very well, right? I mean, you hear coaches say it all the time, man, we just didn't play very well tonight. We struggled a little bit, or hey, we really played well. We really got into our stuff and was going. And I think what happens is you can't have overreaction. Probably a biggest thing for me is I love the 3-point shot. Well, part of that being an identity goes all the way back to your summer workouts or kids getting in and earning, like some people call it the green light club. I know they're in a program I was involved in for a long time. We had the 1,000 point, or the 1,000 makes a year, right? You go
Right.
out, you make 1,000 threes. It's hard for me to question if you're open for you not letting it fly, right? Come game night. That's why you put that time in. And I think it's about not overreacting on the nights it doesn't go well if you are staying true to who you are. So, like you mentioned, if you're a team that plays fast and you press, you can't overreact to getting beat for a layup here and there. Um, if you play fast and you're going to push, yeah, you want to take care of the ball just like any team does, but you're going to naturally probably have some aggressive mistakes in terms of trying to push the ball ahead. Same way at the 3-point shot. You can't go to the locker room and have the manager hand you the clipboard and it shows that you're 2 of 15 from the 3-point line and then go down in there and say, okay, girls, we're not going to shoot any threes the whole second half.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me. So I think a lot of it comes with the identity. I would also throw in the identity. I had note here, the identity in terms of how the game is being called. If you are a team that is extremely physical, you guard in a physical manner, you guard with some hands, you guard with some traps, and you see that the game's being called a certain way, you have to be able to adapt. That doesn't mean you change the way you're playing, but it means you adapt. That's the one thing with the officiating thing, going back to last week's show in this identity discussion, is it's not where I would love to see officials actually take some pressure off of themselves. I would say this as a coach. It's not the official's job to adjust to the game. It's the coach and the player's job to adjust to the officiating. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it goes back to, like, you know, I think of the Chiefs yesterday after the game. Yeah, I think Patrick Mahomes is a super player. He's a pretty good face for the now and the future of the game of football. Andy Reid's great coach. I thought they were out of line at their press conference yesterday, calling it embarrassing for the NFL. I thought it was embarrassing that an NFL wide receiver couldn't line up correctly. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not the official's fault that you didn't execute correctly. You see what I'm saying? It's the
Right.
official's job to call whatever the rule is in that particular moment. So in your identity, if you're a team that guards extremely aggressive and they come out and they call a couple hand checks or a couple body fouls or a couple physicality fouls, you're going to have to find a way within your identity to adjust. But don't you feel like part of knowing your identity also involves coaches and players understanding how to, what's the word, kind of adapt
Yeah.
within the course of the game to still be who you are, but still execute what's necessary on that particular night to win that particular game.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I had in my notes there's got to be a difference, and I want the people we're talking to here tonight to understand what we're saying here. There's a difference between adjustments, okay, and who we are at our core. There's a difference there. Like you have to be who you are, okay, and what you stand for as a team and what your identity is, but you can't be stubborn to the point where you're unwilling to adjust at all in an effort to win a game, because there are going to be nights, okay, there are going to be nights where, yeah, we are a man-to-man team, we pride ourselves in our man-to-man, um, but for whatever reason, we can't guard this team tonight. We're having some matchup issues. Maybe they're more talented than us. So we're going to play zone. We're going to play zone in an effort to win this game. Or hey, we typically are a team that, like you said, shoots a lot of threes, and we're not going to give up on that. But we think we have a mismatch inside in the second half, and we're going to try to exploit that a little bit. That's an adjustment. That's not going away from who you are. Your example of going away from who you are would be, well, I'm 2 of 15, so now if I'm wide open, I'm not going to shoot it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I said it to a kid. We had a kid in our JV game the other night. Good player, good shooter. He takes a three wide open from the left wing, uh, and missed it. Good shot, wide open. Early first quarter. I mean, just in the flow of the offense, missed it. Okay, comes down 2 plays later, same exact situation, catches it wide open on the wing, doesn't shoot it. And that stuff, I asked the kid later, why didn't you shoot that? Well, I'd missed the first one. What's that have to do with anything? Like what? Like anybody who played with me knows that never,
You're just
never,
getting loose.
that
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
dissuaded me from taking another one. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? But yeah, so yeah, early in the first quarter, it's just getting stretched out. But no, I mean, but my point is, if it's a good shot, it's a good shot, right?
Right.
Now there's
Right.
time and score at times which make it. Don't get me wrong, we're not going to take the wide open three like you said earlier with 11 seconds left, right, or whatever. But But for the most part, if it's a good shot, it's a good shot. And I think that's where your identity comes in. That's you have to have that thing you sort of hang your hat on, Shayne, that you feel comfortable with, that when, yeah, it's not going great tonight, but I know we're good at this. I still know this is what we're good at, and this is how we play. And I've seen a decent amount, at least this year, of teams that are struggling with that as I watch them play a little bit. Kind of trying to figure out maybe how they want to play, or what kind of style they want to play. And the teams that are a little further along with that, and let's face it, it's usually the experienced teams, right? It's usually those teams that maybe have played together for a year or two. The teams that are a little further along right now in that, they just look like they're playing a little more fluid basketball. Like I hate to just say prettier, but it just kind of looks a little more rhythmic, and just because they're comfortable in their own skin, so to speak. So no, I think it's huge, and I think something's going to be interesting, Shane, as we watch throughout the season. I think that probably will get better a little bit. Some teams will never figure it out, unfortunately, but I think for a lot of teams it will improve.
Probably the last thing that I had down, and this is the one thing that I have not had the chance to do, other than maybe just literally like a few minutes here or there. Um, as I said earlier, I've probably watched almost 40 basketball games, but I haven't had a chance to watch practices.
Uh-huh.
Certainly haven't had a chance to be in many film studies. I'm on a couple people's huddles where I can see what the coaches have put down on their notes and stuff, and I do appreciate that and enjoy that, just because I enjoy that kind of stuff. I'm kind of a
Right.
basketball nerd like that. But the one thing that it reminds me as I step away from coaching is how hard we sometimes make it in coaching. Like I coached with a guy, one of my best friends, for one time for a good bit of time at one point in my career, and sometimes I would make him mad because he would ask me, "What do you see? What do we need to do? What do we need to do?" And I think sometimes we think we've got to make this new play, we've got to make this new thing, we've got to tweak this, we got to tweak that. I watched the game film the other night, two teams I could have cared less who won. Just it was on someone's huddle and I was watching it. It was a scout film for this particular coach, and I just turned it on and was watching it. And the team that ended up losing, they had a chance in the first half to kind of open up a 10, 11, 12 point lead. And on two situations, they were in an advantage break where it's as simple as dribble, pass, catch, lay it in. And they were going to go up 10 one time. Another time that it went up 12. And on both situations on the other end, one time the team scored a two, and the other time they hit a three in secondary break. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this team has played such a good first half. And here they are, they go into the half and they're only up, this instead of this. It has nothing to do with how they ran their offense. It has nothing to do with how they guarded. It had to do with 2-on-1, dribble, jump stop, make a pass, catch it, lay it in. You know what I'm saying? So like
Right.
I talked a lot about film, your film work and your evaluation of your own team. I know sometimes we look at some big things because we think, man, we don't have time to worry about each little thing. We're looking big picture. We're doing this. Sometimes you mentioned giving jobs to your coaches. You really need some eyeballs on your film that can look little, I like to call it. Look little, because sometimes, Matt, you don't need three more quick hitters. Sometimes you need to pass and catch better. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Sometimes you just need to ball fake, deliver the ball on time in the two quick hitters that you do run, and get the proper shot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you don't need to reinvent the defensive end. You just might have two defenders that were a step behind on the midline on the rotation or the helper. That's what you need to get better at. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to come in Monday's practice and put in a whole nother defense. You need to go to the film room, show this, get on the floor, and get those two people into their correct spot. And then the defense has a better chance. So I would challenge people to look little, because a lot of times I'm watching these games, especially you can watch the game so clear when you don't have a rooting interest. I'm the
Right.
first to admit it, man. I watch some games and I like you're really invested in who wins. You get a little emotional.
Right.
It goes back to our officials talk, right? And
Sure.
fans talk. But if I'm just sitting there and I care less who wins, I'm just watching good basketball, you can see it so clearly. You're like, Well, he didn't get midline. Well, he didn't help the helper. You know what I mean? He didn't do
Yes.
this. They didn't need to do anything fancy. They just needed to drop down there and box out. So the ability to look little sometimes, I don't know if you've been able to see that as you've stepped away from coaching over the last year and a half, but have you noticed any examples of where, daggone man, sometimes I made that a little too hard as a coach?
Well, yeah, I think sometimes when you take the emotion out of it, like you said, you see things so much better. It's like I used to think, when you go to a locker room at halftime, sometimes your head is just spinning as a coach, right? You're a million things are going through your mind, and you're kind of like, okay, where do I start? And I kind of had a system in place in my mind of a progression. I'd ask myself like three or four questions to try to get my mind right. But even then, sometimes I couldn't tell, um, and and it wasn't until later after I watched the film that I thought, man, I wish I'd have noticed that a little sooner. And even your assistants sometimes are wrapped up in it, right?
Sure. Oh
I
yeah.
almost think I almost think sometimes if you had a coach, if you had a guy sitting in the stands that could care less who wins, and then right before halftime says, "Hey, come down and tell me what you see." You could probably get the best advice if you trusted that person and he had good knowledge, because like you said, when you sit back and watch a game and you don't have as much in it, you really see things. You see things more clearly, and I do think that there probably needs that's where your assistants can really come into play, if you can have somebody that can see some of those things for you. And like you said, I had in my notes, and I've always believed this, where more games are lost than won, and I've always been a
Mm.
big believer in that. And especially in basketball, I just don't think it's there are some sports where playmakers maybe make the difference, right? I just don't know in basketball. I think basketball, um, where mistakes beat you more than great plays win typically. And I think that that's what you're talking about. A lot of times it is those little things. Did you have a careless turnover when you didn't need it? Did you try to do too much in a situation and it led to a careless turnover? Did you force it like we talked about earlier? 7 seconds too early at the end of a quarter, and it led to a score on the other end. Those are mistakes that those unforced errors, right, in basketball, because you're going to have some mistakes because it's just a crazy game being played in a small space. But what about the unforced errors? So some of that stuff. But no, I agree with you. I think that uh, I do think sometimes it's yeah, I love X's and O's and I love strategy, and I think there's a place for that. But I do think sometimes there's a simplicity to the game too that we need to remember.
Yeah, it really is. And that's not to say, I'm glad you said it that way, because it's not to say sometimes it is an X and O problem. Sometimes you're not getting so and so the right look, or you're not getting that man, that team's gone three possessions here in the fourth quarter. They've got this stud post player who has 20 tonight, and he or she hasn't touched it in the last three possessions. So by all means, there are times for that. But I guess in closing thoughts, that my closing summary statement would be something you've heard me say on expanding the zone before, Matt, where everything is something, nothing is everything. Right?
Right.
Like when you're watching, you make the point about the person in the stands. I think a lot of times that's kind of where it goes to your coaching staff. Who do you have at trust? I do 22 scouting reports a year when I coach, but I actually do a 23rd because once a year I do a self scout where I give that to the team. And I
Hmm.
said, look, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. This is just what I believe other coaches would say. And if you have someone in the basketball circle that you trust, have them actually do the scouting report for you and truly give an outside perspective. And I'm telling you, as a coach, sometimes it'll open your eyes to how other people perceive your team. Man,
Right.
maybe my identity's not what I thought it was. Maybe I'm not doing this the best to my ability. So those are some of the key things. But that trust and the overall ability to watch the game with an open mind, not feel like you invented the game. You're not Dr. Naismith, okay? So like you didn't do that. I turn on the scoreboard and I listen to these coaches talk and stuff. I love interviews, and sometimes you'll hear people say certain things, and you'll chew on that for a while, and you'll think, yeah, I really like that, or man, I don't know that I love that statement there, and you'll listen to those things and really think about them. So when you're watching the game, allow yourself to dive into that, and you're naturally going to be more invested in your team, but allow yourself to have those moments of film where you look little. and you find those little detailed things on, I don't know that you're going to go and put in some magical defense in the next practice, but you can go into the next practice and get better at midline, right? You can go into the next practice and get better at jump stopping. Um, so look little and look for those little details. I think that's the biggest thing. And that's why I love this particular podcast that we do, because it's constantly challenging me to get better. And I hope, just like the feedback we ended up getting from the officials, that we get some of that same feedback from players or parents or coaches and some of those things. So, Matt, sum this up for us. Put a cap on show 62 for us in terms of your final thought for what you've seen here in the early season, maybe even what you're looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, I think that what I've seen early in the season doesn't surprise me a ton. Okay. The stuff that we've went over tonight, you kind of expect parts of that, right? You kind of expect some time and score issues. You kind of expect some, some learning this new rule with the new bonus and all that, or, the 5 instead of the 7, right? The foul management, some things like that. It's going to take coaches some getting used. It's going to take officials some getting used to. The defense being a little ahead of the offense. We didn't really talk about that, but with the physicality a little bit, I guess it kind of walks hand in hand where, and I think I mentioned this in one of our previous shows, like the preseason tends to be kind of physical because you're trying to get your kids in that defensive mindset. And in your scrimmages, you're probably not having as many fouls called. So you almost get in some bad habits. So I think the physicality early in a season is worse. Hopefully as it goes, it'll clean up a little bit. So I'm not real shocked with anything I've seen. I think what I hope to see is just some of those things getting cleaned up. Honestly, I hope to see players settle in, coaches settle in. I hope to see officials settle in and get used to this new rule a little bit too. And I think everything will kind of improve as that happens. What I hope and what I'm interested to see is if we do a show like this, and I know we've got other topics over the next couple of weeks, but let's say 3 weeks we come back to a situation like this and say, hey, what are we seeing? I would like to think that we're not seeing the same things. Hopefully we're seeing some different stuff at that point to talk about. But no, it's been good. I'm looking forward to our next couple shows because I think we've got some interesting. I think we'll have some interesting takes on some coaching stuff. I think we'll have. Obviously, there will be things that pop up that we see as we watch games that we'll want to talk about. So there's in my mind, I've already got a list probably of some things I want to talk about for the next show. That's what makes the show fun. So, yeah, I think we covered a lot. It was good. Looking forward to just kind of seeing what the next couple of weeks, really leading up to Christmas. I always kind of felt like basketball was sort of, that early season. I don't want to call it preseason because it's not, but that early season leading up to about Christmas time and then coming back into January and kind of getting into those dog days of basketball, through January and up to tournament. So I'm looking forward to this next couple weeks up to Christmas break to kind of see how things go.
Yeah, you mentioned ideas for future shows, and I've had several. I'm sure you've had several. I've even had some people and talking. I love the idea of the point guard perspective in the day of the positionless basketball, talking about the post player and playing with your back to the basket. You and I had mentioned some different things about the running clock and some of the different things that's going. I think that that's almost more than just mentioning it on a show. I think that could almost be an entire a thing that coaches and fans need to watch the game in a certain way and understand. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things. As I said earlier, can't thank people enough for the feedback. Stop us at games, email us, get us on social media, all these different things. We're out there. You can get us right here on YouTube. But we'd love to hear from you, and we're looking forward to doing these things throughout this. So Matt, I don't want to cut you off. Are we good for
Yeah.
show 62 to move on? And then again, that laundry list of basketball topics, we're going to break it down throughout the year. So again, thank you, Dr. Chris Good, for all the support. Check us out on YouTube, get us on your podcast app, and we'll keep bringing you a lot of basketball coverage throughout the winter. So look forward to coming back at you here soon on a show 63 on one of those topics that we're mentioning. Until then, he's Matt Holmes. I'm Shayne Holmes. This is Expanding the Zone. Thanks, everyone. For telling lies, make me feel at least like a